Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today I want to talk to you about Bagatelle, a fascinating board game slash sort of billiards table, in fact, but we'll come on to that in a moment, that I came across during our recent time away at the beginning of July. We sort of took a 2 week, well, I took a 2 week or more like 6 day holiday because I'm a workaholic. And we get out of here. We went as far as we were comfortable going during a pandemic, down to a campsite in Driffield in East Yorkshire, and from there we were able to explore on little day trips other places. So we went to Flamborough Head, for example, which was amazing, a wonderful section of coast with a tremendous seabird population. Great fresh air, wonderful views, chalk cliffs. For my money, much more interesting and exciting than the White Cliffs of Dover. But hey, that's just me. And crucially, really easy to visit safely. You know, that the whole social distancing thing was entirely doable there. We went to places like Beverley, for example. We saw Beverley Minster, a wonderful building in the heart of a large town, which this is the second time that we've been there, and both times we've been to Beverley, we've stopped off at a cafe called, is it Vanessa's? I think it's, I'll put the name on screen. It possibly escapes me just for the moment, but they do amazing cakes, and this time was no different. They had a wonderfully tart jam that I just loved. And also we went to places like Bridlington. Bridlington has a friary that was of interest. We sort of stopped off and had a look around. I quite liked the architecture there. I quite liked the portion of the graveyard that had been sort of given over to a rewilding to enable insects and pollinators to thrive. But then we moved from the Friary into Old Town, which has a main focus of one particular street that sort of winds slightly as it proceeds. And the buildings are older than the rest of Bridlington. Bridlington New Town, it seems, is a little, maybe a mile or two away from Old Town. But Old Town has a sort of feel that's not dissimilar to York, actually. There are parts of York at the top of Coney Street, up by the Eye of York, or the Clifford's Tower. There's like an old theatre or cinema building that sort of reminded me of this as well. It's that sort of 17 into 1800 sort of architecture, and this street was wonderful. It was well, I hate using the word, but it was quite quaint actually. And as we proceeded, they clearly know, that they're in the Old Town. There was one of the shops had a series of sheets of paper outlining the history of the street and a great fire that the Old Town survived one year. I'll put them on the screen if you want to just read them. Feel free to pause and take a look. But it was good, and we found yet another wonderful place to eat. There was a Georgian tea rooms with an antique shop above, where we had what was it? I think it was called an East Yorkshire ploughman's. I think basically it was a ploughman's with everything, with pork pie and pickle, and I think there was a Yorkshire rarebit as well. It was gorgeous. So more beautiful food for the holiday. But it was actually just after we finished that lunch and we came out of the store, ironically enough, having browsed above and seen nothing that we really wanted, then I saw Bagatelle in the shop opposite, which actually was a sister shop. They were sort of related. The owners share space, as it were. So it was kind of the same shop. And in the window, Bagatelle was there for about £35, and I sort of had a look, and it's clearly not made of antique wood. It's basically in places veneered MDF actually, and sort of particle board. But that's fine. I was primarily intrigued by the game. So I sort of went in and went, I know it's not an antique, can I get it for 30 maybe? And the guy goes, yeah, go on then. So got it for 30. I also picked up a really cool painting that I want to modify at some point in the near future. But that's a whole other project. Bagatelle is fascinating. I actually, I went in and I said, what's the retro pinball that you've got there? Because it is sort of pinball. It's a board where there's a spring-loaded mechanism to launch the ball onto the board, and the ball bounces off literally metal pins. As it goes, it makes a wonderful noise. Oh! Hang on, I'm going to grab my phone. There we go. I just scored 150. It just happened on camera. Well, off camera, but here it is. I scored 150. But the shop owner actually corrected me and said it's Bagatelle. Well, actually, the labels, it looked like it said Bagatelle. So in a vaguely Yorkshire way, how much for the Bagatelle? Yeah, it doesn't take long for me to slip back into Yorkshirishness, having lived in York for a few years. It's such a wonderful accent, and also the words people use and the truncations. Which is actually a little bit like Newcastle, actually, as well. Newcastle has some similar stuff going on, like I cannot be asked, this kind of thing. Anyway, so I'm being distracted. So I went in, Bagatelle. He went, Bagatelle? Yes, Bagatelle. He showed me the board quickly, that it worked, and I took it home. Well, took it back to the camp. And that night, we played Bagatelle on a fairly wobbly, screw-together portable table that we had with our van. And it was fantastic. It's a really cool, fun game. And you quickly notice certain things. The points further down are really hard to get to, because essentially you have to be lucky enough to bounce past everything, even these fairly wide moors that are waiting to ensnare your ball, or your bearing, I suppose, your ball bearing. So the hardest point, 150, is a single little capture, just above the 125 there. There are a couple of small triangles of pins that are worth 5 points each, and the points range from 5 to 150. So right at the bottom there, you've got the best and the worst scores possible on the board, and the whole thing comes with a set of 10 ball bearings. That's really nicely, actually, as you push the ball bearings along, the shape of the channel that they rest in actually presents the next ball bearing for you. Put it in the launcher and thunk, off you go. And yeah, we had a great time. It was a really, really lovely evening. There'd just been a thunderstorm, so we'd quickly taken down our gazebo for fear of, it was a fairly, it was lightning, fully on lightning, so we didn't want it to actually, get a lightning strike. But in the sort of the after atmosphere of a storm, in that sort of still air that's slightly charged, and with the wet gravel below, we were having a grand time. Taking turns at this game, 10 goes in a row each, trying to get the best score that we could, and she always beat me. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, she's as I said last time, she's amazing, seemingly at this as well as so many other things, and I didn't mind that at all. I was mainly loving this thing because, well, that's not true. I did mind because I'm slightly competitive, and I would appreciate some tips. So if you have any tips for Bagatelle, please share them below. I think it's something to do with the amount that you pull the launcher back. You can sort of control how hard the ball's going to go and how far it's going to go and where it's going to sort of deviate from its launch trajectory by how hard you pull that plunger. But anyway, the thing I love about this game is that it's got that feeling of pinball without the expense of a pinball table. Because obviously pinball tables are not cheap to buy, they're definitely not cheap to maintain, and the parts for pinball tables are only going to get scarcer and scarcer. There's little light bulbs that aren't LEDs. Although that said, I suppose you could, and people do, swap out pinball table parts for LEDs, actually. That's interesting. But anyway, I mean, I grew up in Rel and Prestatyn. I grew up around pinball tables, and I love them, but I just know I can't afford one. And so Bagatelle has that sort of, it satisfies that launch moment, that sort of that plunger pull and seeing where the chips may fall. Yes, you don't have the flippers in Bagatelle that you might do in pinball, but it has that same feeling, and I really love it because of that. And hence I simply had to have it when I saw it. Interestingly though, Bagatelle has various variations, one of which is essentially a sort of a billiards table type game. There's a fairly famous cartoon, I think, with Abraham Lincoln playing Bagatelle, where you have a series of what almost look like an apple tray, where balls can be caught in the different pockets, and people are trying to maneuver to the highest scored pocket by avoiding all of the other hazards. I think traditionally Bagatelle is played with wooden pins. There are little wooden stakes in the board that direct the ball, much like the pins do on my Bagatelle here. And it sounds as though it had a real heyday. It was a really popular game in the late 1800s. And actually, as soon as I shared the photo of this guy on social media, lots of people were very excited. In fact, my wonderful father-in-law was like, "Oh, mere Bagatelle." Apparently, that's a phrase that people say, mere Bagatelle. He definitely wants to have a go next time he comes for a visit. But yeah, Bagatelle. I knew of something of the lineage of pinball, and also this sort of sets up also in other parts of the world. For example, in Japan, you have pachinko machines, which are very similar to this sort of thing. So I knew of this. I didn't know it was called Bagatelle though, and I'd never had a go on one. And all I can say is, I heartily recommend. But yes, in the meantime, any tips would be welcome. If you have a way of pool sharking the field, then watching a stranger come into the hall and then fleecing them for all the petty sweets that they've got, let me know. I'd like to get better at this. I don't actually want to fleece my wife, but I do at least want to win one game. That would be good. Thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully this has been interesting. Until next time, do take care. Bye bye.